Hello to Think Fast with me and Suchita. Hello, hey Suchita, how you been? That is my terrible
British
accent.
like
My terrible
Dharavi
British
meets London accent. Varun, what was that?
I'm back.
Oh my God. How are you, mate? Now I've gone Australian. I evidently haven't spoken to enough English people in very long. But you missed Adele. How did you miss that glorious Hyde Park performance by Adele?
I did go for arguably the best musical I've ever seen, which is Frozen.
Oh, good Lord.
It was outstanding. Like, I'm as an adult who has obviously seen Frozen too many times because I have a daughter who has watched it like 1,000 times, but genuine production, like on stage with like stuff happening where like, okay, how did they do that? And also in the Peppa Pig land. And
oh my good Lord.
but I also lived in the
Jesus.
countryside for a week and that was amazing.
Okay, that sounds, this Peppa Pig land is like...
Peppa Pig land is really interesting.
I had to make sure I don't say like and I don't say because one of our listeners called me out on my feverish use of like and So I need to, guys, please check me
Maybe
on this.
I should start saying like and as like, it's like you told one host not to say it, so let the other host start saying it.
Exactly. There you go. Sita or Geeta.
So did you like doing the episode with Amit last week?
Dude, we had so much fun because Amit always picks up topics which, oh my God,
It's okay,
I am
just say like,
sucking
it's
ass
fine.
at this.
It's fine, say like.
So basically Amit always has this really interesting ability of picking up topics that I wouldn't even address and we end up running through bits and pieces of it. So last weekend was a lot of fun. It's kind of like how you are with your creator economy thingamajig, right? Amit is that way with like a mix of political something sprinkled on top, and then he'll find these like other really cool zany topics. Also, he pushes back a lot. Like I feel like Amit and I have very like debater type conversations about topics versus you and me, where we'll just ha ha he he ed ha.
But I think they're different vibes. We'll get Amit on here. I think at some point in time we should get him on as a guest.
Yeah,
but what's been happening? What's been happening in the news?
What's been happening in the news? First, can we talk about my life, Varun sir? I am moving houses yet again. This is
no. What?
Oh my God. Yeah, but to be fair, I found a really nice place and I'm going back to my favorite colony in Delhi, which I will not name just in case people show up in that general area because we've been
Think Fast fan club coming with boards saying suddenly Viral Bayani and Manav Manglani are outside your house.
Oh my God, they will not find anything interesting. But the weeks when things have suddenly picked up, man, I mean, picked up in like good and bad ways where, obviously one big news of sorts is that whole theme of celebrities investing in brands has continued with Plum onboarding Rashmika Mandanna as an investor and brand ambassador. I have no idea who she is, but she seems to...
How have you not seen Pushpa? I know you don't watch movies.
Sorry. Yeah. But that was interesting. What was also interesting is not Purple, but Purple Style Labs, which owns Purnia's pop-up shop, which incidentally is doing fairly well. They sort of, found a really nice niche in wedding fashion and, ethnic fashion, but not super high end, but that nice, like, mid sort of like range. They apparently have raised about $10 million from none other than Madhuri Dixit Nene and a clutch of other investors. But things have been a little shaky for the likes of Good Glam, whose deal with Raymond, which we discussed a couple of episodes ago. Apparently that acquisition is... they're figuring things out, for the lack of a better word, because of some valuation mismatch or some such thing. But those are the larger pieces of news that caught my eye, man.
Yeah, there's also been some interesting pieces, obviously on a slightly more negative end. There's the news from Udaan having to maybe sack about 800 employees. Byju's is going through some issues of their own, with what's really happening with White Hat Junior. I mean, are they going to rebrand it? What are they going to do with it? It seems to be up in the air in that sense. So a lot of stuff happening on that front. And very weirdly, I don't know if you saw this news that, you know about Jeff Bezos' yacht?
No. What is this?
So Jeff Bezos owns the second largest private yacht in the world. I mean,
not surprised.
Charadin uncle is at it. And it was built, and I think in Rotterdam, but for it can't pass under the Rotterdam bridge. So they were either having to they were thinking of dismantling the bridge to let his yacht go through. And obviously there were huge protests against it. Yeah. So now he's still trying to figure out how to get his yacht out. It's stuck in Rotterdam. They can't get it past that bridge. So Charadin uncle
God.
has
Rich
to maybe get
people
like a
problems.
spaceship. Hardcore
We will
rich
never
people
have
problems.
these problems. We'll never have these problems.
I don't want to own a yacht ever. Like, what is I get seasick.
Yeah, but by the way, one company unrelated, but one company we should talk about is Lenskart. They've been making money moves. They just acquired this Japan-based eyewear company. I think it's called Own Days or something like that. But they've genuinely been really thinking about their international expansion. They've been
Makes sense.
they've been fairly interesting in the M&A space, where they're genuinely trying to standardize the experience of eyewear, glasses, etc. Really playing to that ambition of wanting to be like Luxottica of the new generation, right? So Lenskart is making money moves. We should talk about them in the next episode.
And I think also the good part with them is they're not trying to be Warby Parker. They're trying to be Luxottica. I think that's really the difference here, right? Everyone thought they're trying to be Warby Parker, but if you look at what they've done with John Jacobs, for instance, right? Build a really premium brand which they own. I didn't at some point realize that they owned it, and I've owned John Jacobs in the past as well.
Yeah,
And
they've become full house of brands. I think they were original house of brands.
I agree with you. And also like good product, great service. I've not seen too many people have issues with Lenskart. So yeah, we should definitely talk about that. That space is super interesting actually, the eyewear space. What else is happening? Pret-a-manger. Oh, I went to Britain and Reliance decides to get Pret-a-manger to India.
Of course, those two are correlated.
Of course, because I scoped it out for the Reliance.
Of course. Might as well. Ise bhi khareed lete hain. No, but I found this not acquisition, what am I saying? This, franchisee thingy of Pret-a-manger, or however the French say it, because I was reading up on how to pronounce it, by the way. I think that's how the plebs say it, but in like French, because apparently it stands for ready to eat. It's like pronounced in this very like bougie, like shoo kind of way. But whatever. Do you think this format will work in India? I have my doubts. There was another one. Remember that had launched? What was it called? Au Popé.
There was, I have no. Oh, Popé? It's like Punjabi from Canada.
No. I am sabotaging the pronunciation. I can't even remember what the brand's name was.
Jealousy says Monge.
No, wait. Oh, wait.
Oh, Pape. Oh, Pape from Canada is come to give us sandwiches.
No, but while I figure the thing out, but there's this Abhi that's very popular. Yeah, you know it. It's all over New York. Now this is going to bother me. Oh, it's not all Popeye. Sorry. It's
Popeye quotidian. Oh, they're here in India. Of course they are.
Yeah, but it's the same.
Quotidian. That's how I pronounce it. I can't get these pronunciations. It's Au, like Shakti Kapoor Au, pain, quotidian. Right.
Yeah.
So official ambassador. Imagine Shakti Kapoor could be their brand ambassador. It's like, pain quotidian.
Of what? Pret-a-manger.
No, pain quotidian. It's like, pain quotidian. This episode has gone sideways at some level. Okay, let's get to more important news, which I don't really care about, but the new Nothing phone. I mean, you seem to care a lot about the Nothing phone. You were going all gaga over it on our Slack.
I wasn't going gaga over it because number one, it's not like I give a shit about phones. Remember, I was forced to buy a new phone because my other old ass OnePlus 5S or whatever it was literally stopped working. I think I like the approach, man, because, you'd assume that phones would pick up on the same, three things of like camera or, keyboard functionality or memory or storage or whatever. But the thing that I liked about the Nothing phone is how they're using gestures and gestures associated with light as a way to bring newness, because otherwise what else is there to a phone? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I like the general thought behind it. But again, remember, I am not a phone snob. I have no idea. I would be very happy with
I'm a full phone snob, so I'm like...
We know you're snobbish about other things also. Lest you forget. But last two quick things over here. Snapchat apparently has launched paid subscription, and Meta apparently is going to shut down its crypto wallet called Novi from September. And
didn't they shut down their VR headset also? Like recently, put that on hold.
Are you
something
mad?
Something with their
Oculus.
VR. No, something with their VR or a metaverse piece they did put on hold recently, if I remember right. Something just very recently. I'm going to have to check that one out. But yes, Meta's obviously trying to do some things to figure themselves out. I don't even know what Meta is half the time. For me, it's Instagram. I don't think of anything, and WhatsApp, of course, where, by the way, last news in this very random introduction which we have done, which has no sense to how it has flown about. It's like I have come back from in the UK and given insanity to this, but you can finally quietly exit WhatsApp groups, which is the best thing ever. Because I always wait till 4, 5 a.m. to exit a WhatsApp group, because it gets, and these are those really bad ones where, everybody's going to send good morning messages. So you exit at 5 a.m. and everybody sends good morning messages and nobody realizes you exited. But now you can quietly exit.
What strategy? Only if you apply that strategy to your life, Varun, things would be very different. But in any case, what are we talking about today, brother?
You're tapping into EdTech India, and the spot of bother it seems to be finding itself in. I'm going to tapping into how Reliance is planning its entire succession plan, which seems to be super interesting. Pinterest, there's been a shake up right up top at Pinterest. Yeah. Seems very interesting. I don't know enough about Pinterest. You have a lot more information than me.
So Pinterest. Yes, queen.
Yes, so you're going to tap into plant-based meat, which I incidentally did try a reasonable amount of over the last few weeks. So I have consumer perspective on as well. And Twitter's testing long-form notes. So, I think the larger question of what is a Twitter is what we need to get into. And that's pretty much about it for this week. But yes, and some other random stuff which we'll throw in between. But before all of that, and before we make it random about Shakti Kapoor and Au in quotidian, we'll take a break and be right back with Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast, where my normal accent is back. And we are talking about EdTech in India, or as we like to call it, tuitions on online platforms. What's happening with EdTech, Suchita?
So I'm going to try waking up, ladies and gents, because I evidently have had a long day and the coffee hasn't hit me hard enough yet. But getting into the topic, so, obviously 2020, 2021, were like the glorious years of EdTech, right? If you were an EdTech company, you didn't even have a product. You had like literally 3 ants working for you. You would raise $100 million at $1 billion valuation, right? That's basically the extent of madness that was happening in EdTech.
Can I just make a side note here and say, anybody want to take please someone follow Danish Seth and just watch his videos on two Bangalore boys doing a startup. I'm just like, when you said that, I'm like, got to watch that. That in context to what we're talking about is very important. Loafers.
That was amazing. Yeah. But getting back to, obviously 2020, 2021, like I said, glorious years. Everyone was all gung-ho. There were these crazy, wild, M&As happening in EdTech with Byju's buying White Hat Junior for some $350 million and Vedantu buying someone for some absurd amount of money. Unacademy, launching multiple different products and talking about how subscription and product is the future, this, that, and the other. And obviously you cut to this year, right, where there's been this like big reckoning of EdTech. Obviously, the more tangible parts of this reckoning has been the amount of layoffs that have happened. So apparently over 1,400 teaching and non-teaching staff have been laid off by Indian EdTech companies since the start of this year. You've seen everyone, no matter how big or small, right? Someone in the general league of Unacademy that has been, very bullish about their mission and where they're going and the multiple products that they're launching. Even they've laid off reportedly 800 to about 1,000 people, and down to companies like Topper, or companies like White Hat Junior, which have been acquired by Byju's. They're also seeing a lot of, layoffs are happening across the board. So, one part of it is layoffs, but, Varun, you spoke about this in a past episode, which, and the point that you made very valid, that too, is what happens when students go back to classrooms, right? What happens when quota factory opens again, not literally, but like figuratively, right? So is there even any technology in EdTech, and was this reckoning bound to happen, or is it just, everyone's correcting, so we might as well correct while we're at it?
I feel that in many ways we spoke about EdTech as almost a replacement, right? And I feel that's been the big problem, is that for this whole we're suddenly not going to go back to classrooms. It's going to be a replacement, is where the real problem was. In many ways, there's some things you can't replace. And an example is a company like Lead, right? I spoke to someone from that company a while back on Advertising Instead, and he spoke about how their idea was not to replace the schools, but to almost become the operating system for schools. Because most schools in physical classrooms are still functioning in a very analog format, and they've taken that approach. And I think that's scalable, because you're working along with the system, you're looking to upgrade the system. I feel most edtech went from, like, look at an Unacademy, right? Start of YouTube channel, went on to single platform and going further there. And in many ways, it tapped into, and we'll never call it that, but now you can call it that, it tapped into the tuitions market. Like in India, we always had the whole tuition thing, right? I remember I did brilliant tutorials to study for IIT, which I did not obviously get into when I was in my 10th or something like that. And that's always been a thing in India. But to call this a replacement is where the real problem was. And also, I think this aggressive sales strategy that has happened with across EdTech, where you hear stories of just a kind of calls, just a kind of pressure on sales teams to get people in. At some point, it had to kind of come through and become an issue. And I think that's what's happened here. I mean, from a broad context, I think that's what it is. And I think there's been no, it's like a land grab. You're just trying to get things in. But when you look at most of these brands, what are you really building towards? Are you really changing how education happens? I don't think you're changing. You're giving access to more information. It's not a YouTube, but get information here, pay a subscription. You have live classes, you can get answers. So again, that's tuitions. But is it a replacement? It's not.
Yeah, and one part is that. I think the second part is, and obviously I don't have any data to back this, but I'm assuming the cycles have, happened because these companies have now been around for over 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And I think the cycles are showing that these edtech platforms may not be producing the heroes that they said they were to begin with. So, for example, like if you look at any of these Akash Institute or, your Brilliant Training Center, which evidently isn't brilliant, your marketing was what? Your marketing was putting out an ad in Times of India talking about how, FitG toppers came from your institute, right? Like I literally remember opening Times of India and just seeing Akash ke ads where they'd say, topper 1, topper 2, rank 3, rank 30 are all, Akash kids. Now, I don't know if Byju's and or Unacademy / their, the things that they acquired, I don't know if any of those have been able to help parents make those claims or help students make those claims. And the truth is, at the end of the day, like all of this novelty and all is cool, but the proof is literally in the pudding, right? And the pudding in this case is having kids clear these exams, right? Or having kids top CBSE or, top their physics or this, that, and the other. Once, these cycles show that much ado about edtech and that these platforms are not being able to deliver results, then you sort of go back to questioning fundamentals. So again, I don't have data to back this, but my assumption as to why, these guys may or may not be seeing a churn, which also explains their layoffs across the board, is this. It is that results are coming out and results are potentially, possibly not showing that, none of these guys have been able to deliver on their promises, which goes back to the point that you just made about, having aggressive sales teams, this, that, and the other. I think the other thing that's also happened is, if you just look at the way Unacademy, right? I remember listening to this podcast in between Gaurav Munjal and Shailinder Singh of Sequoia. And he, was sort of like waxing eloquent about how Unacademy is very product first and, they're focused on product-led growth and product-led distribution, which I'm sure they are because apparently Relevel is doing fairly well for them. But, what happens once COVID starts cooling down, you immediately see them launching new centers. What was one of the big things that Byju's did last year? They paid $1 billion to buy Akash, off of which apparently they're getting into trouble because they are delaying some of the payouts that were owed to Blackstone and the Akash guys. But long story short, when the dust settles, you see what is working and what isn't. And what evidently isn't working is, online education access, blah, blah, bullshit in driving the kind of results that students and parents need to see in order to continue investing in them.
Yeah. And I feel that in many ways, while there's access, especially students of this category, I say schools, college, etc., they still need that physical. But where there seems to be interesting movement is, but although I feel there are too many players in that space, is this whole teaching professionals who want to learn more things. So there's a lot of these cohort-based courses happening around that, but I think there are too many platforms on that. Full disclosure, I'm invested into a bunch of them as well. But I feel that's really where pure online really works, because if you're working, you can't go to an offline space and get to learn something, but you can do that online. It's easier for you to do. So I feel that's the only market where it can work.
I don't know, man. I'll push back on two things over there, which is like if you've seen the way Upgrad has changed their positioning, right? Like they started out with this same, upskill, up level, etc. But now their whole thing has become, Kaam ki degree. Or for example, Scalar's new ads that have gone out, their print ads that they release. The print ads carry saying 1 crore salary package guaranteed. So I think generally the thing with any of this edtech and you look at companies like Coursera and the likes, right? At the end of the day, the thing that you learn needs to, because it's in the general realm of education.
There's also a market requirement.
One is market requirement. Second is, dude, like all of these are ways in which we signal what we're worth. You know what I mean? And if you can't quantify what you're worth, then like what even is the point? Just one last thing over here. I know we're already over time on this segment, but one last thing over here is actually I think the model that I like in this space is, two. One is Leverage EDU and the other one is called Leap Finance and a couple of other things. But what these guys are doing is they're targeting Indian students who want to go abroad. And that student base actually has more like diverse needs, right? One is finding the right college. Second is getting your visas. Third is, capital and loans that you may need to finance that education. I think the interesting thing that's happening is, you're seeing a lot of these like companies that are targeting the top 1% from a money perspective, not from a, any other perspective, but they're going after these, like top 1% who can afford to send their kids, to international colleges. And that, if you remember all the conversations we've had, ends up being an audience that also ends up driving the most maximum amount of ROI, if you think about it, all things considered. But enough on edtech.
I just have one thing to add on this. So I recently invested into a company called Under 25, right? They've been around for a while and they've built this entire community with colleges and students and etc. They're venturing into this space and they're taking an interesting approach, which is decentralized education. The first time I've always tried to invest into education because I feel that's one of the core things that has to change in terms of how it has always happened. They have actually a white paper out, which I'll try and get. So maybe in a following episode, they've released a white paper in terms of how they're looking at decentralized education. They're using the blockchain of sorts, but also taking that concept and pushing it onto education. If it works out, which a lot of us are hoping it will, it could really be a change and not necessarily just like taking the offline stuff online, which seems to be a lot of the other stuff. But might be good to dig into that if saying maybe that could be the future of pure online. But I know that they also do a lot more offline with their online. Get into plant-based meat. Are you a plant-based meat eater, Suchita?
So, I have literally tried every single Indian brand that has come out within this plant-based thingamajig. In fact, even for LBB's Accelerator Basecamp, we invested in this one company called Eat Better, which does jackfruit-based products. I know we'll get to like our opinions on this, but we categorically told these guys, please don't call yourself plant-based meats because one, not enough desis get it. Second, if I really wanted something that was plant-based, Indian diets, unlike American diets or like even, UK or like Western country diets, we have a lot of veggies in our food at large. We're not only eating like aloo, chawal and like, meat. But again, before I get into my theories of this, I've tried every single brand. I don't particularly like any of them. Even if you look at the labels, like the sodium content in some of these companies is off the hook. Like it's like cellulite ki dukaan, you know what I mean? Like when you look at the back of the package. But what are your 2 cents and what do you see happening internationally?
So I tried a bunch of plant-based meats internationally, and I'm just kind of comparing, and you hit an important point at Indian diet versus internationally, how diets are, let's say in the Western markets. The largest amount of stuff consumed is meat, right? If you look at it, there's burgers, has meat in it, everything has. I literally walked by a 100% vegan restaurant. My mom's vegetarian, and we walked in and realized that every single dish they had was based off plant-based meat. My mom's like, no, I'm eating it. I'm like, why aren't you eating it? Because it'll taste like meat. I don't want to eat meat. So I think that core incident for me is the problem for an Indian context, is because globally, for someone who is used to eating meat on a daily basis, you want to transition to a slightly more healthy option. You move to plant-based meat. It's obviously ecologically better. You're not also like for your own personal health, it's better. But in Indian context, I think we already have enough alternatives which are natural.
Paneer, bro.
Which don't
paneer.
Have.
Number one.
Yeah, paneer you can have. I mean, even like soya, right? Like soya is a great alternative, if you ask me, in that sense. And I also feel that we have a different definition of what is vegetarian and non-vegetarian versus the Western market. So this category is a little confusing for me. And I feel most vegetarians won't go for it because, like you said, they'll get confused and like, I don't want to eat meat. And most non-vegetarians might turn around and say that, why won't I just eat other alternatives, or I'll just eat chicken? Why do I need to stop eating it? Because you also have more chicken eating, or country chicken and mutton rather, because we can't eat other things anyway. And but funding seems to be going on. If you just look at this, the data we kind of pulled out, we've had a lot of stuff, a lot of investments happening,
and from a lot of celebrities also.
Yeah, Virat and Anushka, they invested into Blue Tribe. You had Ritesh and Janelia Deshmukh who built their own brand as well. So a lot of action happening here, but the confusion is, where is it really going to work?
So, in fact, we guys had this like long sort of session with the Eat With Better guys, whose jackfruit dishes are delicious, by the way. Like, they're so good. But, one big thing that we sort of spoke to them about is that consumers think in values. So, for example, just calling something a meat alternative, or, calling something soya or jackfruit or whatever, that doesn't cut it. So, for example, in my opinion, what was soya's biggest selling point? It was protein, right? So increase the amount of protein in your diet, because vegetarian diets typically don't end up having as much protein as non-veg diets. So their USP was, your meal component needs more protein, and soya fills that need gap. So for example, when you were talking to the Eat With Better guys, one proposition that we sort of picked up on was how jackfruit, because it's so fibrous, pick up on that as a value. I think the problem with terming with calling something plant-based meat, you're not telling me what the value of that is, right? You're not telling me what switching to a plant-based meat or like a meat alternative does for me. Is it easier on my gut? Is it better on my digestion? What's the ROI that I'm getting by consuming this? So I think the one big challenge each of these guys have run into is they haven't really given any nutritional benefits. That's one. And the second is, at the end of the day, like I remember we guys were on a call with either someone from Marico or one of these large FMCG companies. A point that they had brought up was one thing that's consistent with Indians, no matter whether you're talking to Indians en masse or you're talking to the top 0.001%, who in any case most these companies seem to be targeting. The one thing that's consistent is Indians, no matter what other proposition you have, they will not compromise on taste. So, you can say whatever, bro. You can say best protein, highest fiber, made using whole wheat, this, that, and the other. But if it tastes like shit, desis ain't touching it. And I think that's the other thing that a couple of these companies need to solve for. Because I don't know if you've tried some of these companies, but the food, like, it is extremely processed and almost like plastic. You know what I mean? Like, it has this like very weird texture. I don't know. Those would be my two additional cents on this.
I feel the other point to really talk about with this is, we were running through some of the data online, is saying that it's the Indian plant-based meat industry set to grow to 400 million USD the next 2 years. And I didn't even realize that 200 plant-based meat, dairy and egg ingredient startups. But to your point, which you just made about a lot of these ready-to-eat kind of things, ready-to-eat itself hasn't really worked in India, right? If you look at what is a big startup which has done ready-to-eat and been successful, I feel as a market, because we don't have as much refrigeration. But I think in the larger sense, we like to get our food fresh. And also it's cheaper to get fresh food in India than I think most other markets, which is why we don't have a cold chain. Secondly, this whole thing about fresh food. Like I literally had an uncle who once said the ice should be fresh when he wanted to have his drink. And I'm like, what is fresh ice? But my uncle said fresh ice and strong soda used to be his thing. No prices were guessing what uncle was drinking, but nevertheless, has ready-to-eat ever worked? I can't think of a single brand.
Yeah, so I think both ready-to-eat and ready-to-cook have, I won't say they've struggled, but I think like they've stayed in niches. Like ITC obviously has their big, ready-to-cook sort of range in their dal makhani and this, that, and the other. ID Fresh obviously is, the mother of all ready-to-eats because they have crushed it with their idli and their dosa, batters and mixes. They also recently launched paranthas. I think there are spaces in these categories which are interesting, but I don't know, man. I think if you look at any startup, especially in the D2C/consumer brand space, very few of them have been market builders. Most of them have genuinely just picked up an existing consumer need, but serviced it, much better. And you've seen that happen with the likes of Epigamia, with Country Delight, which we spoke about also, I think, before you left. But it's just, India, unfortunately, think about it yourself, bro. What was the last example of a successful consumer brand startup, especially in this FMCG-ish type space, which has created a new consumer behavior? Very, very
Yeah,
few. I can't even think of one. Like everything's generally been like dahi, ice cream, like paneer,
exactly.
idli, sambar in that general
Yeah.
territory.
I mean, the only right to it I can think of is the ID Fresh guys who
Yeah,
really innovated.
yeah.
I mean, for me, that dosa batter, the fact that they took over that market for me, because I, hardcore South Indian family, grew up with just need to get this freshly made at home mindset. I've seen so many people convert to that. And also product innovation, right? I mean, their vada maker is like genius, if you ask me. Like,
Yeah.
you can actually make a vada out of a squeezed out piece. I think they're the only guys I can think of, but they took over batter. You still have to
Yeah.
make it at home. So I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a
yeah.
nice way to kind of move it. And also, I never realized this, but plant-based meat actually has higher taxes in India. So that also makes it more expensive, which is
Yeah.
what...
But work on your taste, guys. Work on the problem statement. Think about
should
customer
not taste
needs.
like.
Yeah, don't try creating a niche, associate yourself with markets that already exist. That's just like the formula that works
Or just
over here.
export it to those markets. That seems
That's
to be...
true. Yeah, but then you need a product that tastes well, that tastes good. What is wrong with me today, Such? Wake up, wake up.
Like, does it like taste good or does it like taste well?
I've purposely not said like or in the past 35 minutes, behin.
Take a break and be right back with Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast, where your favorite social media platform is having some changes, Suchita.
Yes, I am, by the way, obsessed with Pinterest. So, guys, our next story is about Pinterest and obviously the one big money move that they've made where...
Before you go there, can you guess
What?
what my last search on Pinterest was?
I don't know.
Guess, give wild guess. What is Varun doing? What can you imagine I search for on
Mirrors, because you're narcissistic.
Pinterest? Close. You're getting there. What did I search
Getting
for?
there. I don't know. Yourself. That could be the second most obvious
My
search term.
only boards on Pinterest are two categories. One is interior design, by the way.
What?
I have
You
mood
like
boards of that.
interior
Yes.
design? Oh my God,
I do.
Varun, we have more in
Especially
common
for
than I
studio
thought.
spaces. I have a weird knack of desk and studio design boards on Pinterest.
Lovely.
And I also look at a lot of men's fashion. Today morning, I was searching for Taika Waititi fashion for some reason and looking through Pinterest.
Oh, he dresses well, though, for what it's worth.
Really amazing.
But in any case, coming back to Pinterest, so obviously one big bombshell news was that its CEO, president and co-founder Ben Silverman has transitioned to the role of a executive chairman, and a gentleman called Bill Reddy is ready to take over as CEO. And this Bill Reddy guy, by the way, is a gangster. He is joining them from Google, where he served as president of commerce, payments, and next billion users, and oversaw Google's vision, strategy, and delivery of its commerce products. Now, I am a Pinterest stan. Like, I'm obsessed with Pinterest, and I use it for a lot of home decor is one. Even from a business perspective, by the way, Pinterest for us at LBB has been one of our fastest growing channels from a consumer engagement and reach perspective. And I think India is one of their second largest markets, or some such thing. But without, digressing, I think one big challenge that Pinterest has had, which has, come up in multiple different conversations, earnings call, etc., in the past, is it's such a loved and such a well-used platform. They have over 400 million users. They have over 300 million pins per, some whatever a baseline metric. Long story short, customers are obsessed with Pinterest. It's also a platform that's grown from strength to strength, right? Much unlike Twitter, which has, been more or less the same, hasn't really seen features evolve. But the one Achilles heel that Pinterest has had has been its ability to monetize. And this guy seems to be brought in, to really rev up Pinterest's monetization engine. So what do you think of this piece of news, man?
It's interesting, right? I mean, he's been at PayPal, been at Google before that. Commerce and operations seem to be a core piece that kind of comes out here. So definitely it shows the direction they want to kind of go in and develop in, because I think the product's great, right? And whenever I go onto Pinterest, which I do, I say occasionally, I think once, or I think a few times a week at max. But I don't think the platform needs too much upgradation. Maybe on the video side, I know they've added a few things there, but you see a lot of things, but just for you to be able to purchase it, kind of go through that cycle is where I feel there's a lot of stuff for them to kind of work towards at a very like basic consumer level, if you ask me. But it also shows that, it's that constant conversation about the transition, right? You have one of the co-founders kind of moving to, a slightly more executive kind of a role, or rather chairman, that board kind of a role. And you have someone who's an operator who has a very clear focus on a certain area taking over, because that's where the company needs to go. So it's showing that Pinterest as well as kind of hit that maturity point where it needs to happen. They also had a bit of a tough time in the stock market, but all tech stocks have had tough time in the stock market. But I think it shows that this is the right area of focus. I think it will also make investors happy, because that's where they should really kind of focus on.
Yeah. I think what would be super, super, super interesting is if Pinterest and Etsy found a way to really work together, because I think the thing that makes Pinterest very unique is...
Combine.
Now, I don't know what the technicalities of a merger or whatever else will be, but if you look at what is Pinterest's biggest USP, it's the uniqueness of content that they have. That's one. And I think the second thing that Pinterest has is, I'm pretty sure 99% of their search will be unbranded. So I'm pretty sure 99% of their search will be things like what you just mentioned, right? Interior design for studio, gray walls in a room, right? Or men's fashion, or, Jenna Lyons' style at J. Crew or whatever else. Now, that's great, because essentially what you have the capability of doing, unlike Amazon, for example, where I'm assuming most of the searches end up being branded, what you end up doing in a scenario like Pinterest is you actually end up feeding on the intent of a consumer, which is loose, versus servicing an intent which the consumer already has. And I think that's their biggest strength. And and if I were them, that's what I would be doubling down on, where if I have this unique supply of information, how do I marry it with a unique supply of actual brands and products, which I think is what Etsy has. So one really interesting thing, and I hope it happens, especially because I'm obsessed with Pinterest and Etsy's home decor. I think that's one category where they have like an immediate, overlap, is how do you bring these two universes together? And one small thing which I, saw in one of their earnings reports was Pinterest currently monetizes through advertising revenue, and Pinterest's advertisers are actually small to mid-sized businesses. So they end up making a lot of their money through, these up and coming, unheard of brands. Like you won't really see, Colgate, Palmolive putting a lot of money on Pinterest, but you'll see these, really up and coming, interesting mid to long tail of Shopify. That kind of supply ends up, advertising on Pinterest as well. So it seems like they've got the pieces in place. I love the brand and I love the product, and I hope they do well. But one quick question for you. What is your take on, this CEO stepping down / changing? I'm fascinated by this general, topic and theme of CEOs really figuring out what the succession plan is beyond them.
Honestly, most founder CEOs, right, at some level, I feel, go through a cycle where obviously you're building it from scratch, you bring it to a certain level of scale. But at a certain level, every company needs someone who's a stable operator who looks at it as a business, as a P&L, as revenue streams. And that structure often isn't something all founders have. And I feel that's when this transition starts happening. I also feel the board plays into this a lot more. I know for a fact that investors play into this a lot more. But in most cases, if it's done at the right time, it actually helps the company stabilize.
Yeah.
Because founders like to experiment a lot more than I would say standard executives do, which is what brings out innovation. Yeah. But if you last too long, you also have scenarios like what we often talk about Meta about, right? I mean, has Zuckerberg stayed on too long and as he hold too much control is often a question about them versus see what, like, like an Amazon, right? If you look at it, like, Jeff Bezos kind of moved out at a certain point of time. Google's a great example. They did it like in stages, if you think about it. When Eric Schmidt kind of came on initially to help kind of bring some form of structure to the business. And later on, again, you had, them, both the founders handing over and moving away. It's a natural progression. And I feel it's important for founders, CEOs especially, to look at it from that lens. Because just because you built it doesn't mean you have to stay there forever. You need to make sure it lasts beyond you. And I think that's when you need to do it. If you don't, the board will make sure you do it in many cases. Or if you control it for too long, the company might not survive. So I think those are the few things. I mean, Glossier did that recently, but obviously that's a whole different conversation there. And I think that's going to be a trend for a long time.
Over to your topic.
It's from what platform you use a lot to a platform I enjoy a lot, Twitter. But I often ask myself,
Why are you lying? It's actually Pornhub.
We're not allowed in India. It's banned in India. नहीं देख सकते इंडिया में ये सब. Government ने ban किया. सब illegal चीजें नहीं करता मैं ये सब.
Acha, Twitter, but you use Twitter a lot.
Twitter.
I'm shocked
Twitter. I use
Twitter
Twitter
hasn't
a
been
lot.
banned by the government. But
No. There is no way any government in the world will ban Twitter. For the prime reason that Twitter is
biggest enabler.
Elon Musk, if you realize the town square, most political discourse, most news channel, media information all comes from there. And they're testing long form notes now. They're testing in a few markets to kind of for people to put in like long form articles, go almost bloggish, which is interesting considering one of their founders, Ev Williams, was the founder of Blogger and then later went on to build Medium. And Twitter started as a micro blogging site. So, obviously Ev Williams has this trend of following the blogging world. But I feel more interesting, it brings up the question saying, what is Twitter now? Because everybody seems to have a different definition. They also had a lot of features. They tested out that whole stories model, which I honestly did like, called Fleets, if I remember it.
Yeah.
Which I actually liked. They had audio tweets for a while. Spaces has worked for them. While Clubhouse has died, Spaces has kind of stayed, and it's still been a good way to kind of build community and engagement. Now they have communities as well. You can kind of build into Twitter. So at some level, there's a lot happening on the platform. But I still, if you ask me today, what is Twitter? I don't really have an answer. And this new thing again kind of confuses me as well. Because, for the longest time, you stuck to one format as your predominant format. But if you have long form also kind of coming in, doesn't it take away from that? While also weirdly, they have a newsletter product. They acquired a company, if I'm forgetting the name, which became their newsletter product. So you can have a newsletter on Twitter, which they just acquired. It's there. I think it's called Review, if I remember right. And they just didn't do anything with it beyond just making it a part of Twitter. So what is Twitter? Is my question to you.
I mean, obviously, one big issue that's happened in the past couple of months is just this like Elon fiasco where so much of, first and foremost, Twitter really isn't even that big, right? It's a very influential platform. But from like a numbers perspective, Jalasmi, we can pull up the numbers, but I'm pretty sure their monthly active users are lower than Pinterest. But again, it just has all the heads of the states and, all the biggest like tech co-founders, movers and shakers of the general internet. It's kind of like the parliament house of the internet, right? That's really what Twitter is. I think, that is its biggest strength, but also its biggest weakness. And not to sort of compare because they are apples and oranges, but think of it as, like any old-ish publisher, right? So, for example, look at something like Vogue or Condé Nast. One can argue what your relevance will be once you stop being as powerful as you are. And I think the thing that Twitter hasn't had to grapple or struggle with yet, because it's managed to keep its relevance alive thanks to all of these, random tidbits of information coming up. Whether it's how Trump won the, US elections because of Twitter, or how, Elon is now trying to like figure his life around buying Twitter, this, that, and the other. But I think Twitter hasn't had to really look in the mirror and say, what is my relevance without my power? And the second that starts happening, right, like all of these bits and pieces will, in my opinion, start unraveling very, very, very quickly. And if you look at any feature that they've launched or any product that they've launched, none of it has been breakthrough. Like, yes, Spaces, sure, maybe, may have high usage. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't think Twitter said anything publicly either. But it hasn't been like a breakout product. Like, I can't imagine Spaces being a reason why more people are downloading Twitter's app. And similarly, with this new feature that we guys are discussing right now, I can't imagine this new feature of adding long form being the thing that makes more people want to use Twitter. So I don't know, man, but like if I were, heading strategy of Twitter or working over there, one big question I'd be asking myself is, how do I almost decouple myself from politics? And how do I, that really popular saying, which is, I'd rather be rich than be famous. I think, I think Twitter is in this like precarious place where they are more famous than they are rich, which is like the worst place to be in. And they need to kind of like untangle themselves out of this thing.
And if you think about it, Twitter actually had the original TikTok. They acquired Vine and later it just died. And most of your early creators came from Vine. And they had Periscope, which is the live streaming app. And I think about the product which they acquired and let die. And I'm like, you could have been as big as Meta. I don't know if anybody wants to be as big as Meta today, but you could have been that. But I feel the larger issue here is that there is no singular way that you can look at the platform. It's like they're always trying stuff and taking stuff off. While that's fine, you still can't put down on paper what it is for. And what you said about being rich, right, is that they've always focused on advertising as the way to monetize. And they actually should take a leaf out of, and I don't know what Medium's numbers are, but Medium did something very interesting a while back where Medium also started advertising for people who write blogs on it, and they took that off. And the reason they took it off is they realized that it spoiled the experience on Medium, and they moved to a subscription paid kind of a model in that sense. And I feel that you could almost take a leaf out of that and use it here. And which I think is one of the core things I liked about what Elon Musk suggested, making certain categories of Twitter users paid, like governments, companies, etc., versus keeping the general user free. I feel that is a far better way to monetize than to go this route. But at the end of the day, it's going to be this really famous platform, like you said, but not necessarily making revenue even comparable. And Rashmika pulled it out, 229 million monetizable daily active users, much lower than Pinterest.
And they have, so that's daily active users, but their monthly active users, I think, are in between 320 and 400 million. So it's the same as Pinterest. And the revenue that Twitter brought in in the year of 2020 was about 3.72 billion. So for a platform that powerful, your like annual revenue is like how much, not to compare fully, but like is how much like Meta would make in a month. You know what I mean? Or like in a quarter or whatever. But yeah, lots of fixing and nixing to do at Twitter, and I don't think this feature is going to help.
One interesting point, just final one to add about this feature they're testing, the notes can be edited, which is predominantly against what Twitter has always been about. You can't edit tweets, but you can edit a note.
Yeah.
Is what they have here. So Twitter's kind of going back on their famous anti-editing stance in that sense with this. But yeah, again, I think at the core level, they got to finalize the mess that this entire Elon Musk thing is made it into, or other circus it's made it into, and really figure out what they are as a product. And I feel for the longest time, they haven't been able to answer that. And I still don't see them working towards answering it.
Yep. Concur. And next.
Before we go to our next story, time for another break. Wow, lots of advertising happening on this. Same like how Netflix is thinking about advertising, but that's the story we've spoken about enough, so we're not talking about today. But we'll take a break and be right back to Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are talking Succession, not the TV show. It's about Reliance. Yes, I don't know why I'm talking this voice, but how is Reliance planning their succession? What are your thoughts on what Mukesh Ambani is doing, Suchita? He's finally putting the next generation of Ambanis on the route to running the business, running the business.
Dude, I think every single like Dadaji or like Papaji running a big business should take a cue from this. One, like, it's so good that he's doing this when the kids are in their early 30s versus, and he is in his...
I like how we're calling them kids. We're all the same. We're all similar ages. But
excuse me, you are ancient. They are closer to my age than yours.
Fine. I'm uncle.
Fine.
I'm
Uncle Varun. But, I don't know, man, but like, the general construct of a lot of Indian businesses continues to be the saga of like the great Indian family business, right? And what's the biggest mistake that most family businesses end up making is, which, Mukesh Ambani bore the brunt of, right? In between, like the Batwara in between him and Anil and the cacophony that happened, back then. But I don't know, man, not that I've been tracking Reliance much, but I hope the signal that this sends to every like Dadaji, Papaji, Dadiji, or, whoever else is out there, I hope they take a cue from this and sort out their affairs while they're alive, while the kids are young, create the right like launching pad, for them to actually grow and adapt to the business as is needed. Keeping the application of this and how it could possibly impact, Reliance positively, negatively, whatever, keeping all of that aside, I really, really appreciate that he has done this at the right time. And I hope people take a cue from this. I've said this 3 times, and if you still haven't caught on to it, shame on you. But what do you think, Varun, now that I'm done repeating myself?
So I think we just look at the news, right? Akash Ambani's become chairman of Jio, and his sister Isha's is chair of the retail arm. If you look at that breakup, obviously there's Anant, who's the third sibling. not to, I mean, there were a few articles about what he really focused on. I think he really focused on just like, more government outreach, kind of working with public policy, that kind of side of things. And he's also on the board of, if I'm correct, he's on the board of Jio as well. While it's not clear about what role he's kind of taking on, I feel for Mukesh Ambani, it's almost like there was a big tussle that happened. If you remember when Dhirubhai Ambani passed away, and both the Ambani brothers had to kind of look at which parts they were kind of taking on and what came after that. I feel at some point he said, okay, how do I ensure this doesn't happen with my children and when the next generation takes over? And it's almost like there's been this story for a while coming along that he always favored the Waltons, the Walmart system of kind of breaking things up and kind of looking at it. I feel this is also smart because he's made sure they were part of the business, were faces, right? If you remember when Jio was launched, both of them, Isha and Akash, were right there on stage and they've been part of those for a while. So it's not like you suddenly brought up, okay, now it's the next generation taking over. You made sure publicly for employees, for investors, these are the people running things to an extent, and you over time hand it over. They also have a public face to it, because of Mumbai Indians and some of the other pieces as well. So I think it's very smart. And I feel one of the interesting parts of this is that they were also part of the entire negotiations and kind of getting that whole deal of Jio and Meta as well and some of the others. So overall, it's a great framework, like you said, for family businesses, and India has a lot of those to kind of follow. But I feel that in recent times, that's happening a lot. If you look at more family business in recent times, a lot of them are following this process and not waiting for future issues to kind of crop up, but they are looking at this to kind of look at this as a more structured manner rather than waiting for things to happen, and then there's always a tussle there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, I mean, I know the public faces of Reliance are the kids, but if you look at the layers that they've created under Reliance Retail, for example, they've got like kick-ass people running the show, right? Isha Ambani can be chairman or whatever else, but the folks who are managing business, operations, finance, etc., are all legendary, so to speak, in their own right. And I think that's what matters. Not just the caliber of the folks on top, but who's really doing the more operational bhagadori day to day, and they've got solid people there. So it's a combination of both that goes a long way, not just the person dictating the strategy, the person standing at the firing line, but who's actually doing all the back-end work that could make Reliance a bigger behemoth than it already is.
Yeah. The last piece I want to put onto this is the fact that considering the massive size of this business, I'm sure this has been years in the making, and it's not something you kind of like build overnight. And like you said, you have sorted professionals who are driving multiple functions and having the family kind of look at it from a broader macro lens in that sense always makes sense. And did you know that Dhirubhai Ambani didn't have a will when he passed away?
What?
I kind of also I was just looking at the details from the article we pulled this out of, and Dhirubhai Ambani didn't have a will. So definitely this is learning from that, because it puts things into a bit of a toss.
Holy shit.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was a 3-year feud for the control of Reliance, and then the Kokileben Ambani, the mother, kind of she stepped in and she kind of made sure there was truce over there between brothers. But I'd say well planned and seems to be strategically done right. Doesn't shake things up. Market will react positively because it shows a good sign. It doesn't feel like, oh, you're handing over. Do we know how they can manage things? Everyone knows they manage things. So I'd say well planned and well. I'm sure Reliance, as it is for India, it is the big daddy, mommy, everything of our country and beyond. And they're also bringing our favorite Pret-a-manger to India. So
whose pronunciation we rogered in the first half. Apologies to our French
not to be confused with Aupe and Quotidien.
Oh my God.
Not to be confused with
better than
Aupe
my
and Quotidien.
Opope. I can't believe I thought that's what it was. But in any case...
Oh, we're going for recommendations now. What is it? What do we recommend this week? Have you missed? Somebody said they're missing Dwayne. Yeah, so Dwayne wants to recommend. Dwayne has a recommendation. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, let me get my camera to focus on Dwayne. Yeah, I see. I can do shift focus. It's called product mode on my camera. I'm out of focus. Now I'm in focus. I'm out of focus.
Lovely.
Now I'm in focus.
You have bored us for all of 30 seconds. What is your recommendation apart from fondling whatever his name is, The Rock? Dwayne Johnson.
My recommendation is actually The Rock, and I don't know where in India you can watch it. I watched, there's a show called Young Rock, which is based on Dwayne Johnson's childhood. It's this really funny sitcom-ish version where it's this future where Dwayne Johnson's running for president. It's actually Dwayne Johnson, and he's talking about stories from his childhood as a kid who grew up around wrestlers and how he ended up where he was. It's almost like if you've seen Young Sheldon, which is the Big Bang Theory spin-off, it's on the lines of that. I don't know if it's streaming in India anywhere. I saw it on the plane and I could not stop watching and laughing. Not because I'm a huge Dwayne Johnson fan, but it was genuinely entertaining. So if anybody can figure out which platform it's on, I'd recommend that show. It's fabulous. And a movie called Hustle on Netflix.
You have already
Adam
recommended
Sandler.
this, I think. Oh, did you or did Amit? Maybe Amit recommended it. Yes.
I saw it on the flight as well. It's amazing. What a great movie.
Brilliant movie. Even for someone like me who doesn't watch.
I've seen a lot of movies.
Oh, good Lord.
I was on holiday.
Yes.
I saw KGF 2 in the countryside in England. That is P. But anyway, what do you recommend?
You can take the Desi out of India, but, as they say, can't take the India out of the Desi, even when he is frolicking in his frock in London.
Yes.
What is my recommendation? There's this very good article by Russ Roberts, who is also very famous, pretending to be in his league. But he runs this very popular podcast called Econ Talk, which I thoroughly enjoy listening to. But he has this article that he's written called My 12 Rules for Life. And I don't know what it is about the air, but I've genuinely really been thinking about, life values, life principles. I'm like in my early 30s, inching towards your age. I just want to make sure I, have like a map, so to speak, with which I, lead my life. And reading this article was quite nice. So guys, go check out russroberts.medium.com, and over there you will see an article called My 12 Rules for Life, or just Google this, and it's really, really nice.
And have you watched Stranger Things?
No, I
This
don't
new
see
season?
Stranger Things.
Why you don't watch Stranger Things?
Never.
Hello, excuse me. This is please
Ever.
watch Stranger Things. The new season is, oh my God.
Oh my God. You know what new season you should watch? Only Murders in the Building season 2.
I have to start watching it. I'm going to finish Stranger Things today and go do that.
Steve
This show has
Martin.
suddenly
He is the
become
best.
an entertainment show, but still, Stranger Things is so good. And weird fact, so there is a song in this new season of Stranger Things, and why I'm saying this is by this artist from the 80s called Kate Bush. The song came out in 1985. It's used in the trailer. She owned 80% of the royalties of the song, and she's made $2.3 million in the last 1 month, just out of royalties in the last 1 month.
Do you know whose song that happened with? Stevie Nicks. Remember that song that blew up on TikTok? Dreams.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Oh, you missed this
Some
one.
facts for you guys. When we recommend movies, we also give you data. That is why this is thing fast.
Yes, queen. Yes, queen. Okay. Toodles, my poodles.
Okay, guys.
Good to have you back, brother.
Bye, guys.
Good to have you back.
And so say bye to Dwayne also. Say bye.
Bye, Dwayne. See you later.
Say guys, bye, turtles.
Bye.